Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the Gnosis website, truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get physical evidence of your divine spark activation, which will immediately cause, within about 5 days, vivid messaging dreams, and long term you'll get an internal mentoring voice, and you'll be led to websites and books and people and things you need to know by all kinds of signals, a variety of signals, physical and mental, that back each other up. And it's all for free at truebluehealer.com, and it's a magic sleigh ride through literally a magic forest. It really is. It goes on for months and years, and you can only do this once. So how about that? It's well worth doing. You're supposed to do this once in your lifetime while you're here in the physical plane. Okay? I often despair at how we seem to be living in a madhouse in the modern Western world. We are living at the best time in history as far as I'm concerned, yet, to paraphrase, I think it was Dickens who said it's also the worst of times. Wonderful time to be alive at this time in the history of mankind. Yet there's a lot of people intent on destroying it, and they're coming at us from grassroots level, coming out of universities, that sort of thing. But first I just want to show you something. I'll show you this image on screen. It's the Australian Tax Office, the ATO, has done something that makes us all feel very good. They're declaring war on international corporations that don't pay tax. And they've sent tax bills to Apple, Google, a few big companies, and there's about 30 whopping big corporations on the list. And it's a really good feel good article to read. The lead paragraph says, it's about time we have a fair go in Australia, and if you trade here, you should pay tax. You see, so what everyone's forgetting is that there's a few things that everybody forgets. One of them is that if you tax large companies, large corporations, they just tend to raise the prices of their products so that the consumers end up paying the taxes anyway. It's actually quite difficult to tax a large corporation. The other thing is that I would say they've got to really tread very carefully here, because we could lose another Prime Minister. Did you know we've had 5 Prime Ministers in Australia removed and replaced by cashed up mining barons and corporate barons? The most recent was Kevin Rudd. Everyone seems to have forgotten that. He kept going on about taxing mining companies, and carbon tax was his thing, or save the world, that stuff, left-wing stuff. The cashed up mining barons, who are worth billions every year, they have massive turnover. One of them just decided to run an advertising campaign costing only $25 million, a 3-week television advertising campaign, bad-mouthing Mr. Rudd, and he was removed from office. And the following day, the new Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, she said that there would be never any mention ever again of the nasty carbon tax. She'll never speak those words again. All right? She was a good, obedient Prime Minister. Do we really think, are we so naive to think that Google, Apple and a handful of other whopping big corporations would let this precedent occur in Australia, where one nationalist government forces them to pay tax? It could be copied all around the world. It's going to be seen as another attack on the New World Order, isn't it? So these big international corporations could easily take out our Prime Minister, and he's sitting on about a 1 or 2 seat majority. It's almost out of power because of his mediocrity and the confusion thrown into politics of Marxism all across the political spectrum. But some of our taxation officials went to Silicon Valley and said, if you want to keep trading in Australia, words to this effect, you better start paying some tax. So we've sent delegations over there, and they've sent delegations back to try and argue why they shouldn't pay tax. And a number of these big corporations is doing the usual thing and threatening to go to the Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. Why should they pay tax? Well, they're going to quote free trade rules and WTO and all that stuff again. But there seems to be an incredible naivety that we lost a Prime Minister recently because he took on the mining barons. It's very, very difficult to tax large corporations because they just raise the cost of their products. And Mr. and Mrs. Average end up paying the taxes for them again. So we always seem to have this very short memory span for politics and history. And Mr. Rudd was the 5th Prime Minister replaced by cashed up corporations. And I wouldn't be surprised if Malcolm's removed, their current Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and another one's put in there who promises to not tax anybody too much and go back to taxing the peasants as usual. So that's the headline today, the feel-good headline we're all reading, which seems to be pointing toward the doom of another Prime Minister. Just wait and see how the, what do they call it, denouement, how the story unfolds. The Marxist malaise is global. It seems to be, the great font of it seems to be universities. We've now got the Teachers' Union, the Teachers' Federation or something, holding meetings and reporters go in there and just listen and tape everything said. And the new crime that we're all guilty of is obedience. Yeah, obedience to the rule of law is now considered a crime. I bet you never thought you were a criminal, did you? But that's the new crime invented by a leader of the Teachers' Union, and they are apparently intending to teach disobedience to children. Frightening, isn't it? The reasoning apparently is that some professor called Zinn, Z-I-N-N, 50 years ago, he decided that, and this is fascinating, that Nazi Germany and Soviet Union were all caused by excessive obedience. It was all the poor people's fault for not rising up and doing some kind of revolutionary takedown of the people who had the advantage. Goodness gracious. A central feature of this speech that the newspaper recorded and reported on by the Teachers' Federation is seemingly the need to make a war against society. Because the newfound crime they've discovered is our obedience, and we've all got to be learned to be more disobedient, you see. And this is from reading a 50, 60-year-old book by Professor Zinn, you see. He's some kind of political theorist. Another thing that we discover about a lot of these young people who want to make war on their own society that gave them everything they have is that about 75% of them are still living at home with their mummies, and mummy makes breakfast for them, and clean washed clothes just appear by magic in their drawer in the bedroom, and mummy makes bed for them. And then they go out during the day, apparently railing and campaigning against the evils of the system, the patriarchal system as usual, and the obedient system, you see. So what we have here is basically, and they're not getting married, that's another thing that's been noticed. They don't leave home, they stay home till they're 35 or something. And there's more and more, marriage has become unpopular. People stay at home with their mums and dads till they're 30-something, which is alarming demographers because it's lowering our birth rate, you see. So that's the low-level maturity of these rebellious teenagers that have 30-year-old bodies that we keep finding at the Teachers' Federation, brainwashed by university academics, it would seem, who don't know true history at all. I'll tell you what though, something very unpleasant seems to arise from these young people's constant desire. They see a need to make war against their society that gave them everything. And this keeps bringing me back to what Theodore Roosevelt said in the 1890s. He was an early American president, early 1900s, and he just wrote that every generation needs a war, which really put my nose out of joint for about 15 years. But I'm beginning to wonder whether he's actually right. And the fact that they talk about Nazi Germany, they're looking for Nazi Germany, they're looking for Nazis, desperate to fight Nazis, and we don't have them in Australia. We really have no social issues, no social problems. And these people at the Teachers' Federation meeting, it's like a union, they're saying that there's great social battles to be fought in Australia, resembling we need leaders like Martin Luther King to fix all the race laws and that sort of stuff, and we need huge Vietnam protests here, which we never really had in Australia. They're trying to say that people's obedience today is as serious as the Vietnam War was, as serious as desegregation was in the southern states of America, etc. And this great war has to be fought. And I'm absolutely astonished that one could sensibly amplify too much obedience into we need more riots in the streets and more anarchy, because that's all these juvenile-minded Marxists seem to be, anarchists and hooligans wanting to raise a ruckus, and of course deplatforming anyone who wants to speak against them. At first I rejected this idea of Theodore Roosevelt. He was a backwoodsman, a bare-knuckle boxer, a big game hunter and an explorer, and later became president, and he also started a war with Spain. He was mother deprived and thus very authoritarian. We know that's an outcome from being mother deprived. So anyway, but this idea that every generation needs a war was second nature to him. I never liked it much, but I keep hearing all these left-wing people today in the newspapers keep warning us about Nazi Germany, Nazi Germany. Well, you know, it was nearly 100 years ago. Do you really want that monster to come back? Because they are actually bringing it back themselves with their own militant behaviour. They're behaving like Hitler's brown shirts, intimidating political opponents, and brainwashing children like the Hitler Youth, teaching 4-year-old kids they have to be political activists, that sort of thing. They're doing exactly the same thing as they claim to fear, to justify their war against their own society, which gave them everything. We seem to be up against a swell of juvenile thinking in a lot of grown-up bodies. People seem to be maturing slower and slower these days. I don't know if it's just hormone mimickers in the food chain. I really don't know. Is it just poisoning in the food chain? It could well be. I don't know. But Marxism being sprayed over everybody in universities is certainly a factor in promoting juvenile anarchy. Marxism, by the way, is part of the philosophy course, and it's supposed to prevent you ever being a nerd at university. If you learn engineering, you've got to learn some philosophy, basically because philosophy is intangible and you can't calculate things like you can, say, in electrical engineering or medicine, that sort of thing. It's deliberately chosen to be an intangible course you've got to learn to stop you becoming a scientific mathematical nerd, you see. Well, many of them gravitate toward Marxism, which is not a philosophy, it's a fantasy. Quite wrong, already disproven numerous times over. There is no Marxist country that everybody flocks to live in the Marxist utopia. It's never actually achieved it, and it never will, for a lot of reasons. But people are so possessed by Marxism that I really think that people in the Western world need to be doing a course of 500 hours of Jordan Peterson when they finish their Marxism course to calm them down and basically depossess them. They need an exorcism, and I think Jordan Peterson, a good title for him would be an exorcist, to basically tease the Marxist demon out of people possessed during their juvenile phase that they're still going through when they're 30 years old. What does Jordan Peterson actually do? Well, in my opinion, overall generalising, I think he's the father figure that they all miss out on. He's a no-nonsense figure. He'll say things like, "Don't argue with me. Don't think you know better. You're 19. What the hell would you know? You're a juvenile. And I've been studying this for 40 years, and I know where Marxism goes. It goes to Gulag Archipelago. It goes to Nazi Germany." Marxism played a major role in the downfall of Germany and the utter destruction of it before some leadership was installed in 1933. So, wonderfully complicated story is the Weimar Republic, and you will find there's not much information on Google about the Weimar Republic. Funny that, isn't it? It was all done by Bolsheviks invading Germany from the Soviet Union. It's a wonderful story to follow. You can spend your life just following that story. But Jordan Peterson comes across as a firm, no-nonsense father figure that a lot of people seem to lack today, and they need. He's kind of like a surrogate father for these people. And numerous people attend his lectures, and they write back to him and say that his lessons are transformative because he chalks out boundaries of this is evil, that is okay. You keep doing this, that's going to happen to you. I'll walk you through it with me right now in this lecture. Now you have to write an essay summarising what he's told you for homework, right? So he's the stern, no-nonsense, no-holds-barred father figure who gets angry like a father figure needs to with young people at university who are going into total possession trips with Marxism. Okay, so I don't know how to make him a lesson at every university, but he's available at every university in the world, and he seems to be the only fellow who's a good antidote to Marxism. Take my hat off to him for what he's doing. Ayaan Hirsi is a Somali woman who was genitally mutilated at about the age of 6, and she is an ex-Muslim. And she's wonderfully articulate at stating the necessary opposition that we must all have toward Islam, the fake religion. And she's very good at it. She's been on the BBC, that sort of thing, and she debates Muslim apologists and piddles all over them. She came to Australia hoping to carry on her good work, and she's had to wind up her tour early because she's been getting so many threats of violence and death. She talks about the alliance between, strangely, feminism and Islam, where these people threatening her with death and decapitation, etc., are saying that Islam is the ultimate feminism and absurd nonsense like that. But she really does point up how will we be able to live with the Islamic community long term in Australia if these people are allowed to do these things that they threaten to do and can just close down any speaker with death threats. It's something that we've never had in Australia. I'll give you a link for that. There's a great big colourful page today. If you follow Muslim news, you'll probably know all about this. But if you haven't, it's a good read. She's a very forthright speaker, and I commend her braveness, her courage at going around the world and taking on bullying Islam and exposing it for what it really is. By the way, in Australia, I've seen something change over about 30 years. And it's simply this. There used to be an almost unspoken convention that when Australians met each other, you meet a stranger. There used to be a convention. It was It was ultimately written down in a book and became a bestseller amongst social workers around the world, counselling people with Asperger's who were socially awkward, etc., and didn't know how to meet people. So the unspoken convention Australians always had was when you first meet people, you don't talk about certain subjects, sex, politics or religion, you see. And that's a rule of thumb that we all sort of follow, and it's explained in the little book that finally came out, expressing this Australian maxim, fleshing it out a bit. Went around the world, used by social workers all over the place, and it said basically a friendship develops, in case you don't know, by people slowly revealing themselves, peeling layers like that of an onion, you see. So you go, all right, well, that's not too bad, I've heard that, I can live with that. Well, he's not a bad chap, you know, he's okay, you know. And the best friendships can grow very slowly and can be long-term very successful, is due to this kind of social convention that you don't blunder in and start talking politics or sex or religion in the first 10 minutes you meet somebody. Now that seems to have been totally subsumed by modern nihilistic Marxism. Because today in the newspaper we're being told we've got 20 big corporations, including Google, Qantas, our biggest airline, eBay, some big insurance companies, are forcing or encouraging their employees to wear a ring that signifies the need for gay marriage. Right? Did you hear that? Large corporations like Qantas are telling people to wear a ring to show your solidarity with the need for marriage equality, which is not decided in Australia at all. And in fact, the left-wing people, the Marxists who source all this propaganda, are so scared of democracy, they don't like democracy. They want the Parliament to ram it through with some kind of executive order, a special function they can have where they don't have to consult with the public via a referendum or a plebiscite or whatever you wish to call it. So corporations that make money are risking alienating their staff by saying, well, you wear this ring to show your solidarity with the LGBT professional victim brigade about marriage equality. And the implication is if you don't wear it, you're a bigot. And it is said, if you turn up at job interviews without wearing it, you won't get the job. So, I don't know where this political nihilism ever came from, where every minute of the day, the clothing you wear, the food you eat, everything's got to have a political spin attached to it. It's a serious loss of social sophistication and like a surrender to political possession. I don't know why we all have to be so damn political. We used to be criticised for being apathetic, didn't we, years ago? Too apathetic, nobody cares about that. That lets little pressure groups get inordinate power. But now it's everyone's got to be involved in this. If you work for Qantas, you've got to wear this ring or you won't get that promotion. And you've got to say the right LGBT phrases. And some Qantas people have been saying anonymously to the newspaper, what if I'm a Christian? It basically discriminates against me. I don't want to ever support gay marriage. Do I have to lie at job interviews? It's concerning some Qantas employees. So that's how crazy the world is getting. And we seem to have got the disease from America, where CEOs decide that their corporation's only going to sell products to anti-Trump people. Anyone pro-Trump doesn't get their products and definitely won't be employed. And you'll be invited to resign if you're actually a Trump supporter. That's gone through America. It's happening. It's contaging in Australia as well. And I don't know why we have to have politics in every breath we take and every mouthful of food and every piece of jewellery we might wear. Once upon a time, jewellery wasn't allowed in work areas for safety reasons. Certainly in my trade of electronics and electricity. Common sense, isn't it? And now with renewed vigour in Australia, another group of Teachers Federation stuff is pushing the idea that 4-year-old people in play school should be asked questions like, and they're doing it, you should be asked a question like, are you sure you're okay with being a boy? Because, you don't really have to be. It's just a social construct. This is all put to a 4-year-old boy by a teacher with a university degree or something. And you can fill in this form. I know you can't read and write yet, but you just only got to tick the box on this form and you can apply for castration. That's not what it's called. They call it transgenderism, gender fluidity, you see. So genital mutilation is being practiced by the Australian education system, and there's more and more articles appearing in newspapers basically saying parents are getting more and more concerned that why can't you just go to school and learn the 3 R's, reading, writing and arithmetic, and not be politically indoctrinated and get lessons in social warfare and all that sort of business, political warfare. The total indoctrination of children from age 4 is outrageous. I really don't know what to do about it. There's not enough anger yet in Australia, as far as I can tell. Insufficient anger. I don't know what we're going to need to wake us up out of our torpor in Australia, but it's all over the Western world, isn't it? There's articles sympathetic to this cause appearing in some newspapers with a readership of 1 million, and one of the articles, the theme of it is, well, actually, what's wrong with boys being boys? What's wrong with that? Why is there some political intervention necessary in a boy being a boy? Why can't we just accept that? The next step has been suggested in the same article read by 1 million people in Sydney, that homeschooling might need to be seriously considered, which is a bit of a problem. If both parents are working, you really can't do it. So then you've got to organise a local school supervised by parents, which you really haven't got time to do. And I suppose you could get a government subsidy, but then it would be infiltrated by Marxist teachers again, wouldn't it? So you've really got to find a way of keeping Marxist-trained teachers away from school kids, because they're dangerous to the fabric of society. And I think there's not enough anger yet. Or maybe we need a war, so everyone has conventional haircuts and wears the same uniforms for a while, and a lot of people get killed. There's a lot of suffering, and a lot of people come back and say how wonderful it is just to be alive. I think there's a great lack of thankfulness and gratitude for sheer existence. It is a privilege to exist in this physical dimension, and a tremendous lack of gratitude and its replacement with narcissism seems to be a major part of the problem. But I really hope the only solution, practical solution, isn't a huge war again. I really don't want to go down that track. But the Marxists seem to want to take us there. I really don't know what to do about it.